allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So on our agenda, the first item is approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any suggested changes or revisions? Hearing none, the agenda as submitted is deemed approved. Now we've got approval of the minutes from the June 3rd, 2025 meeting. Are there any suggested changes to those minutes? Hearing none, let's take a vote for, I'd accept a motion to approve the minutes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
Who seconded?
Peter.
Peter.
Next item is public comment on non-agenda items. Is there anyone here with us this evening, and all of you audience members who want to talk to us about something that is not on our agenda this evening? Apparently, there isn't anybody here who wants to do that, so we're on to action items. And item number 1 is 25 ZBA 005. Dexter Builders Dexter Builders Randy Rayford, did I say that right? Is here on behalf of the owners at 711 Noah's Landing in Gregory. Anybody have any conflict of interest or ex parte contact to report? No one has any of that, so we can pass that one. We're ready for the staff presentation.
Good evening, Zoning Board of Appeals. My name is Fletcher Ryer, Director of Planning and Zoning with Dexter Township. Today we have before you a request from Dexter Builders, specifically Randy Rayford, on behalf of property owners Kathleen and Michael Dorsey, located at 7511 Noah's Landing. Today we have before you a request for a variance from section 7.073 required front yard setback, 7.02 required water body setback, and section 16.34 water body setbacks. The property is located on North Lake. All of the surrounding properties and land uses are residential and Zone Lakes residential, with a future land use designation as Lakes residential. As you can see on page 9 of 83, the highlighted in blue area is the properties in question. Staff was able to locate some previous ZBA cases for the property as well. One from 2003, where a side yard setback variance was granted for a second-story addition, and one from 2006 with a front yard setback and water body setback variance granted. I will note that the 2006 variances were never implemented. They were granted, the project wasn't constructed, and thus that variance expired. The property before you today consists of 2 lots under the same ownership. The developed lot is the one to the north at 0.118 acres, consisting of a 2-story, 720 square foot single family home with an attached rear deck. The home was built in the late 90s with a second-story addition added in 2003 or 2004. Per the township zoning ordinance, 2 contiguous non-conforming lots are considered one zoning lot. So the setbacks calculated in this report and the lot coverages calculated in this report combine the 2. In August, Randy with Dexter Builders submitted a major zoning permit for the construction of a one-story addition and a 156 square foot front covered porch, 100 square foot addition to the rear attached porch, and a 140 square foot addition to the enclosed sunroom on the back porch. Upon my review, it was determined that there was going to be the 3 variants needed, which is why we're here tonight. Moving on to the first variance, the front yard setback, section 7.073. The zoning ordinance requires a 25-foot front yard setback for parcels located in the Lakes Residential Zoning District and on local and private roads. The current home is set back from the Noah Road right-of-way 16 feet. The second floor addition that's currently there and was granted in the early 2000s was also built 16 feet from the Noah Road right-of-way. The proposed addition before you today in the covered porch that is part of that addition would be 9 feet 10 inches from the Noah Road right-of-way. There are provisions that allow these types of porches to encroach into setbacks, front yard setbacks specifically, but since what is being proposed isn't compliant with today's setback standards, the variance would be setback from that covered porch. You can't essentially give them alleviate that projection provision or give them that provision when they're not meeting the current standards. So for example, if they were to meet that 25-foot front yard setback, they could potentially encroach into that 25 feet by a handful of feet.
By how much?
Let me get you that exact number. Let's see. So for roof overhangs, they could project into the front yard setback 3 feet.
But that's only, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt your flow here, but that would only be for a roof overhang. It wouldn't be for a structure, would it?
So I would argue flooring with the roof overhang 3 feet, you could have some type of patio or deck underneath that for the overhang.
An enclosed structure under that roof overhang?
No, not a whole structure, but
Okay.
the front porch isn't enclosed. It's that rear sunroom that's being enclosed. So that wouldn't count in this projection,
Okay,
if that makes sense.
Mhm.
not clear, but we'll go on.
Okay, well, pause me if
Okay.
you need me to elaborate
Okay.
on any of this. Ultimately, the applicant's requesting a 9-foot, 10-inch front yard setback from Noah's Landing to accommodate the one-story addition as well as the front covered porch. Moving on to the second variance being requested, section 7.02 required water body setbacks. The applicant is seeking relief from the 35-foot minimum water body setback for structures. Per the ordinance, structures are not permitted to be within this required water body setback. This doesn't apply to docks or minor accessory buildings. The applicant is proposing a 140 square foot screened in porch to be erected on the back deck. This structure will encroach into the water body setback by 2 inches, and the requested setback from the water would be 34 feet 10 inches. Section 7.2 establishes a hierarchy for water body setbacks. The default's 50 feet, but as you can see around the township, that 50-foot setback is hardly met, especially on these smaller lots. if adjacent homes exist, section 16.34 allows the setback to be a straight drawn line between adjacent buildings, and the proposed structures cannot encroach into that. And it should never be less than 35 feet. So in this case, the 50-foot standard does not apply because adjacent buildings aren't within that 50-foot standard. We're using that straight line standard and the 35-foot minimum for this. On the plans located in the packet, Randy had the setback from that sunroom or enclosed structure at 34.86 feet from the water. And then the last variance is from section 16.34 water body setbacks. That's that straight line between adjacent buildings that I had mentioned. As you can see from the aerial, a lot of that house already encroaches into that straight line water body setback. Any additional structure added would be an additional encroachment into that setback. So the sunroom encroaches into it 13 feet, 10 1/8 inches. That would be the additional encroachment into that straight line. There are a handful of nonconformities on this lot. As you can see, the lot size does not meet the half-acre lot size requirements. The front yard setbacks are not being met currently. The structure itself is non-conforming. The floor area is not the current allowable floor area for the Lakes Residential District. I will add one last thing here. The lot to the south of the home is considered a common use access lot or a recreational lot due to deed restrictions on that parcel. There are a handful of lots in this neighborhood, south of this lot in particular, that have these same deed restrictions. I've seen court documents from nearby lots as well as this lots detailing that they aren't to be built on, and they're to be used by the neighborhood. I've had residents further down Noah's Landing call about similar projects for them to find out later on that they can't construct anything on those lots. That wraps up my report. Randy is in the audience today, so he can give a little summary about what is being proposed here today, and I am available for any questions you may have.
Do you have a
Go-
question?
I do, but you.
Well, go ahead. I like to hear your
Okay,
question
well,
first.
so when I'm looking at it's page 21 of 83 in our packets, right? And that's kind of like an aerial view comparing the existing conditions with the proposed conditions, which by the way, I appreciate this view.
Very
It's
much.
very helpful in understanding what we're looking at and what the changes are. But the one thing I was concerned that I didn't completely understand, and I want to make sure I do, is when we talk about the 16.34 water body setback, where it's calculated when you draw the line between two adjacent structures. I see that there's a setback here, the 50-foot setback that's drawn. And then we had talked, there was some discussion about it shall not be less than 35, and that's not the exact language, and I recognize that, but that is also in section 7. But then it refers to this adjacent, the line between the adjacent homes. Which line is that line? That line isn't illustrated here, I don't believe.
So the line is best illustrated on page 27 of
Okay.
83.
Thank you.
It is a difficult standard to put on paper
Yep,
and to be precise in the measurements.
okay,
Unless you took surveys from the adjacent lots
Yeah.
and get their exact measurements. But that blue hashed line, I would say, is the best description of that section 16.34.
But when I look at that line, it looks like it's even further back than say the 50-foot, than the 35-foot line. It's like further into the lot than the 35.
That was what was confusing to me
Okay.
too,
Good.
is the 35-foot, or I'm sorry, the line between the buildings looks like it actually goes through the existing building
Right.
on this property.
Right.
It does.
Well,
Yeah,
then,
so
Okay.
the house as it currently sits encroaches into that straight line between
Okay.
adjacent homes.
and
They are-
we get to the 35-foot minimum, because
Yeah, we
you
gotta
can, you
go
can
back to
have
the
the straight
35 feet.
line unless it's more than 35 feet, and if you, if your line is more than 35 feet from the water, all you can get is 35 feet
35
from the
feet,
water. Okay, good. I
Yes.
thank you. That helps.
Yeah.
Understand that. much
Yeah,
better.
it's very interesting. It took me a little bit of time to juggle all this
Okay, well,
in my head as well.
Yeah, and me too, especially since the only place I could find it depicted was in the sort of blurry GIS picture that didn't identify what the line was. So I'm good. All right, understand
It,
that.
it may identify what the line is. I just can't read that small anymore.
Sure.
I keep.
And
going.
I believe the township is looking into getting iPads for board members, all boards. It'll be helpful to zoom in on stuff during these meetings.
I had no idea that the township was that wealthy.
I'm just a messenger.
Okay,
Randy is here. I think it would be beneficial to have him step up to the microphone and maybe give a brief summary of what is being proposed and maybe alleviate some questions and some questions that came up today.
okay.
Yep.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members and staff. My name is my name is Randy. I'm here on behalf of the owners, Kathy and Mike Dorsey. And also in attendance is Jeff Brown. He's one of the owners of Dexter Builders. The Dorseys are out of the country right now. We tried to shoot for an earlier date for the ZBA appeal, but a few of our ducks weren't quite in a row yet. And so they asked us to press forward with the application, and so that's why we're here without them tonight. So I want to thank Mr. Ryer for putting together the packet. I think he did a great job of including all the information that's required. And a lot of numbers have been thrown out about setbacks and that sort of thing, and to try to simplify that. What we're asking to do is not to encroach any further into the setback of Noah's Landing and not encroach any further into the water body setback. So the existing deck on the rear, we would like to expand it, but it wouldn't be expanded towards the lake. It would be expanded to the south. And same thing with the front yard setback. There's a small landing in front of the front door right now, a little porch that takes you up a couple steps to get into the house. And we would maintain that dimension with the front porch addition along the Noah's Landing setback. And so I think the letter that Mike Dorsey put in the packet, really spells out the reason that they want to have this variance, or hoping to get this variance granted, in that they do have a home in Ann Arbor right now. Their hopes and dreams are, is if everything goes as planned, that we can do the construction on their house at Noah's Landing, get that ready for them, at which time they could sell their house in Ann Arbor and then move permanently out to Noah's Landing. They've got, family and friends that want to enjoy the amenities of the lake and enjoy the lake property. And by doing this, it would allow them a little extra room to do that. And it would also help them with aging in place in that the plans that we've provided, excuse me, create a master suite downstairs. And it also gives them a little bit of storage and a teeny little mechanical room. So right now, some of their mechanicals are down in the crawl space. We can move those up to the first floor where they would be much more accessible for maintenance. And the storage room, you know, there's definitely not enough room to put any kind of accessory structure on that lot. And so the small 10 by 12 storage room would be for lawn furniture and kayaks and whatever it might be in the winter. Again, I think Mr. Ryers presented a great picture of what's going on out there. And so I would leave it up to you to ask any questions if we can fill in any blanks for you.
Questions from the board members? Well, I'll start out.
Sure.
It kind of looks to me like you can have a 35-foot setback. And you're asking for a 34-foot, 10-inch setback. And on the one hand, that's pretty de minimis. Why wouldn't the ZBA just give it to you? But on my thought is whack 2 inches out of something. I mean,
Yeah.
is that not possible?
No, that's easily done. We can definitely do that. Again, part of our goal is to minimize costs for our clients and to leave that existing structure in place. Would minimize, you know, the work that we'd have to do, but again, to take that 2 inches off would not create any kind of hardship. So that would
Okay.
definitely be it.
And then I guess my other question is, in order for us to grant a variance, we've got to find a practical difficulty. And I'm not clear on what the practical difficulty is that requires the additional structure on the road side of the property. I think you're right. You already have a low deck or something there. And I don't know for sure, but that may not even be a violation of the setback requirement if it's a ground level deck. But I don't think that gives you a good claim to go up from that location with a solid structure. So the question is, what is the practical difficulty that we would look at to say, well, yeah, you ought to be able to come within 9 feet, 10 inches, or I mean, pretty close to the road.
Right. Again, we're just trying to maintain those setbacks, and it was an amenity that the Dorseys wanted. You know, and again, if that's gonna be their primary residence going forward, it just, you know, allows for a little bit more room for the overflow of people to stay at the house. And I guess I don't know if I can come up with a practical difficulty
Okay.
for.
So what's the total square footage of the new construction? Now, what will the gross square footage of the house be once you get done, even including the room on the street side?
Fletcher, can you help me out with that one?
All I saw was the footprint. I didn't see what the enclosed space would be.
1,512 square feet
then-
compared to 720 current.
Okay. Okay. Not a lot of square footage, certainly.
Correct. The, it's not necessarily a practical difficulty, but it would help to visually for that front facade to have some kind of roof overhang on that. You know, it would, you know, it might not have to be a full front porch across the whole front of the property, but it would be nice to create some kind of covered entryway.
Well, again, this is, I don't want to put Fletcher on the spot, but don't I understand that you could have a 3-foot roof across the front under the current ordinance without seeking a variance.
Okay, so if we can cantilever that roof out.
Yeah,
3
3 feet is, and you could go the whole length of your
Okay,
structure, I think. And, don't take it from me, take it from Fletcher.
That's correct. So if the proposed one single story addition maintained that 16-foot 1-inch setback that currently exists, they could do a 3-foot roof overhang projection into the setback along the entire front facade.
Yeah,
they just have to turn their chairs sideways.
yeah, 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 and hope that the wind isn't blowing from the east or whatever, you know.
Do you know what the distance is for the house next door to you in terms of setback? The one to the north,
It's,
because that one's
it's
significantly
less than
closer.
10 feet, they're close together.
And then the house just to the north of that one, I believe the situation is similar, isn't it?
I don't know that for sure.
Okay.
It looked like it.
It looked like it.
I don't
And
think I have.
This is probably nothing new to you guys with all these lake properties that are, you know, the homes built in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and now they're trying to comply with the current zone, so I'm sure this is
Understand.
nothing.
And I'm sorry, can I,
Yeah, by all
Okay.
means.
in terms of parking, the only place they can park is to parallel park in front of the home?
Correct,
They're not allowed to park on that second
that's correct.
lot.
And that's kind of you know, they get to enjoy, you know, the space of it, but they don't really get to utilize it to its fullest potential.
So I guess I have another question. It might be more for Fletcher than for you. But what ultimately is the thinking about the south setback? I mean, can't they, I mean, they can't build on the other lot, but in theory, couldn't they almost go all the way to the edge of the other lot?
Well, as the zoning ordinance reads, we consider it to be one zoning
Yeah,
lot.
exactly.
So with zoning rules, yes, they could build right on that lot line.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how a court would look at that if it did cause issues, but they could.
yeah, I mean, given Dexter's approach to it, which is in all other respects, we treat the thing in order to give them the full square footage that they need in order to get lot coverage. We treat it that way, so okay, I do understand that. And it's not in here, but they've satisfied you about the setback on the north side as well, which is only going to be how much?
On the north side, it would be a, let's see, 6-foot, 1-inch
Setback?
setback,
Okay.
and that
Got it.
satisfies.
Okay, so that's because the roof height is about what, 21 feet or something like that.
I believe so. Let me grab that number
Okay.
exactly. But once you get to a certain height, there's a ratio of a foot added
To
to the
3,
side yard
yeah.
setback.
Above 18 feet.
Yeah, yeah, so,
If I could direct you to 29 of 83. You were talking about building right up to that lot line, and we basically are. Excuse me, I think I may have you know, there may be
we both
a couple.
focused on the same page. I have it. Yeah, you're just a couple of feet or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know that I would want to get too much closer on that, just.
I think that's unwise, but okay, all right. Any other questions for the applicant?
I do have a few. I just wanted to comment, you can tell from the drawings, you guys worked really hard to squeeze into this difficult envelope that you kind of have available. So my questions are really kind of digging into some detail. So related to the proposed covered porch on the roadside, if it is being accessed by stairs to the edge in that 2-foot zone between their property and the unbuildable part, does that leave enough room for walks? Are they allowed to build a walk to access those stairs?
We would, probably, it's only the change in elevation from finished floor to grade is not 2 feet. So I think it's just 2 steps that all we would need.
Right.
And we could bring that grade up to minimize that also, so.
So the grade element, that part, I was actually asking Fletcher about it earlier. For the stairs themselves, per the 1635, is allowed in the side yard. But I was thinking about the walk that approaches it, and especially if they're looking at this property regarding an accessible structure, then in the future, they would probably be considering ramps, where you're getting into ramp and railing. And while it's not the purview of this application, it would potentially put the walk on the other side of that line, where I didn't read all the legalese about what they're allowed to do in there or not. And my question was just really whether that was part of the consideration in the sizing and placement of this covered porch.
Not really, because I assume that we can gain access to that porch from any direction by creating a short ramp that would get us up to that grade. But that does bring up a possible hardship for that front porch, in that if it's to be wheelchair accessible, then it should be wider than, by the time you have a couple posts on there wider than 3 feet.
And in my thought there, that means in order to access it, you would need to be rolling up in the unbuildable part of the land, unless that porch got narrower. But in this case, the porch goes right up to the edge of that 2'9".
But you could access it from the front. It wouldn't have to be accessed from the left side, if you will. You could, that ramp could be on the front.
From the parking area, so it
Yes.
wouldn't necessarily presume reusing those stairs.
Correct.
Okay, then another question related to stairs again, since that's where my mind is right now. On the water body side, when I was looking at the renderings that you've included,
Mhm.
and I don't know the slope over there well enough. Is it a big stair? I mean, it's a ways to go, right?
Sure. Yes, it is.
And there's, in the definitions of steps, what is considered ground level and what isn't. The rendering shows what almost looks like stairs built within a separate structure of, I don't know if they're stringers. I don't know if you're having to do something to retain soil there, but it just comes down to whether or not those stairs stay within the definition of a stair that can be in the water body setback.
Those steps are existing as I have them drawn in there.
Oh, so this isn't new.
That isn't new. Again, we were
Okay.
trying to, on the deck side, we were trying to keep the footprint of the structure and the stairs in the same location.
Okay, okay. That's good. So those are my questions on the steps. Then my other questions had to do with covered porch, but I don't know if other people had questions on the roadside, if we should keep the conversation there.
I was gonna say something about the roadside. When I pulled up today, I was able to park right there. But if they do the covered porch with the porch, they're not gonna be able to pull in straight.
They would have to park parallel to the porch.
And aren't they trying to get more friends and family out?
It's not in the report, but there's vacant lots across the way from them, which they, a couple of neighbors have included letters that they're very amenable to the variance, and they have permission to park on those lots for any overflow parking. And that, if all of a sudden there's an argument and they're not allowed to do that any longer, then they would have to come up with some other solution for getting people in and out of there.
I
And
just lived on one of these lots and it's really skinny trying to get cars in there. So, I mean, you want to have as much parking space as you can.
Sure.
I mean, only 2 cars is not very many.
That's yes, and again, that's part of the practical difficulty of this lot, is that it's so small. It's just not.
the current standards require a minimum of 2 spaces per dwelling. And they need to be 9 feet wide, 18 feet deep. So this configuration does work, but that is certainly a good question where friends and family would be.
Then the other questions I had to do with the screened porch. And when I look at your images and when I read definitions of what a porch is technically covered portion that's an entrance to the building. In this case, that space isn't the entry.
Correct.
When I look at it, it doesn't feel like screened porch. It looks like not quite done house. Between the wood siding, the extent of windows, and the fact that it's hard to tell, but in the image, it looks like there's actually a block foundation under it. Is that
Oh, it
correct?
would be a deck structure.
So it's deck, open air, flowing through.
It would not be insulated, it would not, let me look at the renderings.
So for example, I'm looking on page 34.
Yeah, yes, so the lower or the bottom right as it's laid out in the portrait scape there. So what they've requested is that the lower windows that you see on the lakeside would be glass, and then above that would be just screens.
Okay. And part of that question again is just whether it's something that truly feels deck-like, which it sounds like is what you're doing. And it kind of comes back to Chair Smith's question about why not the extra 2 inches, you know, so if in order to meet the 35.
Yeah.
And if it can work with that, then it makes sense, and it really does seem more like you are just covering part of the porch. But again, the renderings, I don't think help the argument there because it looks like a building. So with that,
Okay, that's just, I just didn't have the grade drawn in there correctly, but it is going to maintain
Yeah.
a deck structure.
okay. So with that, then, if it's meeting the 35, then really all you're doing is filling in the corner.
Correct.
That water side face is where the existing one is right now, and then it's getting roofed.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
decks are part of buildings, right? They are considered part of the building when they're attached. I think
Or
that's
detached.
16-14.
That's where it gets kind of funky in the definitions.
And I was thinking, and I might be wrong about this, that the building was not gonna go beyond where the current deck is, and then I was trying to figure out, well, where's that 2 inches? Is that overhang? Is that, you know, they're bumping out the back of the building by 2 inches?
No, it would just be, well, again, that we were going by the existing deck. The existing
Okay.
deck is at 34 feet.
Okay,
Although in one drawing, it showed it
35.
35.5.
Yeah.
That was another thing that confused me a little bit.
And again, that's why I tried to
Okay.
clarify, that, you know, it's not the numbers, we're maintaining those existing setbacks. That's what we're requesting.
Sure, but that, I mean, that's huge if the drawing that shows the distance as 35.5 is
35.
accurate, then
Well,
you're golden,
Yeah.
but
if the variance is granted and we submit drawings, it'll have the accurate numbers on there, and I
Okay.
apologize for
Okay.
the inconsistency.
That's okay.
okay.
So, yes, thank you. That actually helps explain a little bit there, because I was confused. I was like, well, the deck's at 35.5, then, you know, and the deck is considered a building. I see why you would need the variance, but then on the other hand, is that a big difference?
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
We can,
Oh, ladies and gentlemen.
We have no public.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Is there any public comment? Did you want to talk about this at all?
they wanted a lot more, we told them.
Right. And there are a lot of letters in the file in support. Were there any neighbors that wrote and said, don't let them do this?
I didn't get any emails or phone calls. The letters in the packet are all I received.
Okay.
One neighbor came in to the office and just asked for a copy of the packet.
Okay. All right. We won't read the letters into the record, but we'll note that there were 3 or 4 positive letters in the file, encouraging us to grant the requested variance.
There was nothing from the people on the north side.
Okay? Well, what does everybody think about this?
A few things. Um, if we isolate the structure just to the proposed covered porch for now, if you don't mind. You know, when I look at, the question was, you know, what's a practical difficulty? And I hate to make one up. But then on the other hand, it does talk a little bit about enjoying their property in the same way that people in, you know, the surrounding area enjoys their property. And a lot of the properties in the surrounding area, particularly to the north and north of that, they're awfully close to the road. And so in terms of expanding this, it's not, I don't see it necessarily as an expansion outward, just maybe more of an expansion lengthwise. But then on the other hand, when I think about it, you know, what's a porch? A porch is a landing and may include a roof. And so, you know, I would understand that they probably want to put a landing, and our ordinance would allow them to have an overhang 3 feet. So again, does that resolve the practical difficulty issue? It depends on how strongly you feel that not allowing them to have this variance would deprive them of rights enjoyed by people in the adjacent area.
And does that include people who have violated the ordinance?
Or maybe people who had their homes in place before the ordinance was, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of where it's boiling down to me on that issue. I do not necessarily feel the same on the backside, and I don't want to taint anybody's thought, because I see where Sean was going.
Okay,
So on the street side, because they are so much further back than all the other houses, I'm beginning to feel that the request, if they want to trade their parking, because that's effectively what they're doing, is trading their parking and maneuvering space for covered porch. I'm leaning towards being okay with it, comfortable with it, because again, the house right next door is looming right over that area. So it's not as if they're asking to extend any further than anyone else's. And I don't want to say that there is any type of, that makes things okay. But with what they're requesting, they are tight. But if that's what they want to trade, if it's close enough in elevation that in the future, if they need to build a ramp or change things and give up another parking space so they can get in and out, that's their choice to work with. And that realistically, because it's a covered porch, if they needed to take it down to change it again, we're not leaving behind a grandfathered foundation or any major structure. They would have to come back if they were trying to enclose it or trying to do anything that makes it living space, which still gives us that opportunity to comment then at that point. So that element of it, I was feeling as I worked through it, more and more comfortable. It was a little odd to me about the how do you get up the stairs without building anything in the land next door. And I don't know how contentious or not contentious the site access questions are. But again, they have some of the flexibility, the willingness, and the understanding that they may need to modify. They don't get by right with this approval, the ability to begin to further extend into that setback, that there isn't too much opportunity to get, I won't say worse, but to increase the non-compliance.
I'm guessing there's not a safety issue in terms of like ambulance or fire trying to get down there. There's a lot next door that I guess
I was gonna say, driving around on the streets out there, I think that's all.
they might not ever find it.
That's that, and I think that it takes skilled ambulance drivers to negotiate those streets out in that area anyway. I couldn't find the place for a while and wandered around cursing my GPS system.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
No, I mean, it took me down, you know how there's the street
The
that
other
goes down
floor.
closer to the lake and my car was like, oh, no, go this way. And I'm like, well, that number doesn't exist here. And, but a nice neighbor pointed me in the right direction.
Okay.
So,
Me too.
One more just popped into my head. I don't remember where we have to go with it, but I do know that, sorry, state the fact first, the grinder pump. Grinder pump is right out in the driving area. So they are actually driving around it in order to park. The, is it Multi-Lakes that sort of signed off?
Yeah,
No
Yeah.
sewer conflict. In my mind, I would have been worried about that. And in fact, we did get dinged for that once with Multi-Lakes, but has that come up as an issue at all? Have you had discussions to be aware that the grinder pump is right there? It can get run over, parked on, driven on.
What I had envisioned was putting in, something similar to like a pipe bollard or something like
Mhm.
that would protect the cover of the grinder pump. That, you know, just to make people aware.
Yeah.
Pull up too far.
And again, that's not really part of our purview, but it just helps in understanding the use of the space and the reason to request the 9'10" front yard setback.
You're not allowed to park over the cover. I know that.
No. Not a good idea.
any other thoughts?
Sorry, I had one more related to that, which
Sure.
I didn't see here, which was well location. Where is their well?
Well, it's located, there was a little notch out of the back of the house, just to the left. of
Oh, I see.
Page 21.
Yes, I see. Okay.
Hmm.
All the questions and comments I had
Okay,
on the street
On
side.
the street side.
okay. Any others? Peter, do you have any thoughts?
No, I have them, I'm still mulling actually, so
Okay.
I'm very interested in the conversations that's been
Okay.
going on.
I'm still hung up on the practical difficulty that requires the covered porch.
That's the same thing that I am hung up on because I don't think it meets the definition of a practical difficulty, it doesn't, a sentence that.
That's what worries me as well. I mean, I understand the desire to have it, and in this particular area, it doesn't look like there's been a lot of strict compliance with the zoning regulations up to this point.
Yes.
But I don't think that's an excuse for us to say, well, in certain areas, we just ignore these
Well,
requirements.
I think that's the fine line we always have to deal with
Yeah.
when we deal with these beach properties.
Well, sure,
Because clearly we're approving variances there, for want of a better term, a little more liberally
Yeah.
than we might in other areas.
Yeah, for
Because
sure.
you can't do anything with
yep,
a lot of these. So it all becomes a question of where do you draw the line?
Yep.
You want the property improved, you want it nicer. You're willing to work with the property owner usually, but sometimes it's more.
well, we've beaten the covered porch to death. What do you think about the other side of the house?
I got one more covered porch.
Oh, you got another cover?
Yeah.
Okay, go.
So just again, for the sake of conversation between us, amongst us. They will, even if they use the overhang, they may need some steps to get between the grade and the door. And so, they're gonna need some space, I guess, to do that and to accommodate that. And so that would also be a landing, I believe. And then beyond just the steps that are needed to get up there. So I'm not sure, if that, if that changes your thought or maybe influences your thought and you think, I wouldn't want to see a landing run across the entire front of the building. you know, they have to push the building back in order to get that landing in there. There's gonna need to be something that accommodates that change of grade that's already present there. So, and right now you can see that there is something already there, you know what I mean? Like, so just a thought that you gotta get up the steps somehow. You gotta get into the front door somehow. I'm not trying to change the, you know, the conversation around practical difficulty necessarily. I'm just trying to say, we gotta get into the house.
Well, and maybe I'm not understanding this correctly, but
Yeah.
it seems to me that if we deny the variance,
Mhm.
they can do things that don't require a variance, which such as adding a 3-foot overhang
Mhm.
along the whole front of the place. And you could put in steps that are not violative of the setback also, right?
I don't know.
Well, Fletcher, they can have steps that that extend beyond the setback or into the setback, right?
Yes,
Okay.
they can.
Yeah.
Let's see.
And I'm guessing that there may be some more refinement of this drawing after we act on this,
Mhm.
which might include addressing your concerns in a different way even.
Right, right.
Well, a variance for steps is a different animal than a variance for a deck, right? I
Yeah,
mean, if they need a variance, we'd consider it at the time, and I'm sure, you know,
yeah, but I don't
Yeah.
even think I don't think they need a variance to put in some steps, so. But that hasn't come before the board.
Exactly.
Yep. So low unroofed porches, decks, patios, and steps can encroach into the front yard setback 5 feet. So
Yeah,
That's the point where I'm trying to find the dimension.
sure. Low unroofed porches, decks, patios, and steps may encroach into the front yard setback by 5 feet. And this applies to these structures within 6 feet of the natural adjacent grade. They have some regulations for railing heights and opacity.
So when I'm looking at it, is there a drawing that shows the dimension, the depth of that porch? The existing plan shows 6'1" with an existing deck.
So it would match, it would be 6 foot.
Because the way I'm reading the permitted projections for ground level, well, no, low, unroofed is at 5, ground level unroofed 5. Just then goes back to that deck question. It's really close. It's really, really close. And considering that there is already a 6'2" deck there, really what we're discussing then potentially is whether or not 3-foot overhang versus 5-foot overhang. Which I feel like isn't quite clear in the request that's in front of us. What exactly is being asked for when it comes to that relative to the increase in non-conformity. And part of that has to do with the vertical. That's where I was trying to look so much to understand the vertical for your rise and run, to understand how far out are you really coming? And then frankly, how realistic is it? Is it possible that there could be 4 risers at 7 needed here, which all of a sudden is in, if you're at 11, what's your 3 treads, 33 inches projecting out from the building, which is eating up half your space right there already. And in looking at the elevation, the door does look like it's higher than the deck porch.
Mhm.
Door looks like it is higher, so it is a step or 2 up from the covered porch, which is a step or 2 up from grade at the south end, but it's still a little bit unclear at the center where the existing entry is exactly how much vertical is being accommodated. And because these numbers are all so close, there's a part of me that wonders if you can actually do this without a variance.
I know.
I mean, it's really close.
It's like, you can have one, but not both.
And
Yeah.
again, we can adjust the grade on front elevation of that house to minimize the change in elevation, up to
Yeah.
the finish floor.
Except one of my concerns always is raising grade, which we're supposed to do to keep the water away, also pushes water out into the right of way. And in a lot of these dirt road communities, that increases the amount of water, especially with the slope of your roofs. Granted, I'm presuming everything you're gonna pick up in a gutter and run it all the way back to the lakeside where your dry wells are at. But it just ends up happening, especially with all the driving going on over it. The next thing you know, you got water. Which is why I always just look to see, is there a solution that just gets us up off ground, which is what low decks do and low steps do. They help to get us up off ground so that water can still flow underneath, things can breathe. And again, this is what just keeps tripping me up. You're so close to being able to do this by right. And so that's where it's hard. We have to answer these questions like practical difficulty. Is it self-created or not? And again, that close to being able to do it without having to answer those questions at all. But I'm having a hard time nailing exactly what that one element would be, because I think you have 3 or 4 options. And you had already mentioned that they have some flexibility in the size and the placement and the depth of some of these things. So it's hard to take a stance because of that.
Yeah.
Apologies, that's my own dilemma that I'm kind of going through right now, again, because it's so close. From a neighborhood standpoint, I would much rather see a covered porch than a blank vertical wall. So I think the gestures here to the neighbors, the fact that the neighbors all support it, the fact that you are doing some both design elements that help how it reads within the neighborhood, and then also, again, covered porches in winter, especially if we're dealing with elderly, infirm, disability, difficulty moving, is nice, to make things safe. And that is their goal. Where are we there?
Would it compromise me to reduce the depth of the deck to 5 feet? Or the porch to 5 feet?
But I don't know that you can get it covered. I mean, you can get your porch in if it's 5 feet, but the covering can't go more than 3 feet. Is that right?
Correct.
So
Okay.
any more discussion on this side of the house? Moving on from that, let's talk about the west side. People's thoughts?
I think that's,
Are these gonna be separate votes or are we going to,
Well, it looks to me like Fletcher has gone with a different approach than we have in the past. We've got a vote on all 3 issues. And so there's 2 votes relative to the water body setback and 1 vote relative to the front yard setback. Okay,
and you want to discuss them all and then vote on them all at the same time?
well, yeah, I mean,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
so, and I think we've beaten ferociously the front
Yes.
yard setback.
Mercilessly.
Sorry. I have.
And so then the next question is, what do people think about the water body setback?
I think an additional 13 feet, 10 and an 1/8 inch is pretty big.
Yes, it would be pretty big. But that's not, I don't think that's where we have to go on this.